Hey folks, welcome to This Photo Life. I'm your host, Andy McSweeney. How's your photography? How is your life? How's everything in between? Reasonable to good to, I don't know. It's all gravy, baby. I hope, because I'm certainly feeling that side of things. As you see in the title of this episode, we have returning guest, top photography instructor, podcast host, and all-around photographer extraordinaire, Ibarionex Perello in the house. Back in the house. Man, and it feels damn good, especially after, as you might have heard last week, we had Peter Hurley on the show. I told a bad joke at the beginning before air and it fell flat, so we had something to talk about at the very minimum. And it got me thinking overall about my confidence and how I'm just holding myself back at the end of the day. And I think that is mighty relevant, not only as a quick and cheap plug to that chat with Peter Hurley last episode, number 50 on This Photo Life. But it's also very, very relevant to the talk that I had with Ibarionex that actually went down before the talk I had with Peter Hurley, of all things, in this less than live format of podcasting. And we talked about all sorts of stuff. I mean, fundamentally, we were supposed to catch up in 2021 over the last year of 2020 and how it went down, like that regular segment I've been doing on the show over the regular here on This Photo Life every second episode. However, with Ibarionex being such a good friend, being at a certain stage of his own development, both in his photography and himself, as you're about to hear, those questions went happily out the window as we just had a good old chit-chat. And frankly, about a half hour into our pre-air chit-chat that was only supposed to last 5 minutes, when he said we should be recording this, well, I started recording this and didn't worry about that preset questionnaire that I've been asking people because I think it's good to keep it loose, open, and as I think you're going to hear with these stresses and getting over things that Ibarionex has been feeling over the last while, even far before 2020, all that coming to the front, into his heart, and as something to share, I think was better than just running through that checklist of questions. So, that's the kind of chat we are having here, even though it is marked with the familiar catching up in 2021, insert name, sort of format on the title that we have been doing over the last few episodes. And frankly, I really hope you get something out of it. You know, the point of this little segment that I've been doing every second episode between new guests has been firmly towards helping you just, I guess at heart, remember that you're not alone through this. Whether you're casual in your photography, whether you're a little more serious, whether you're going off the deep end in the pro and even beyond pro level of things, this year and even just this life in general can be a little bit tricky, challenging, and sometimes, let's just say, boys and girls, a head fuck. So to talk with Ibarionex and go through some of those issues that he's been feeling, talk about Clubhouse and why he's enjoying it but not taking on another thing or worrying about the expectation of that, much less on Clubhouse or otherwise, I think was real good chit-chat. And, well, just so many other things like I think I've already alluded to. You know what? Stay tuned at the end of the episode because I'll talk a little more about Clubhouse as my after guest chat for this episode of This Photo Life. Obviously, I want you to follow Ibarionex if you're on there, but I think it is worth another mention and even listing off a few names of things to look out for on Clubhouse, to dwell on Clubhouse, just a little bit past our chat with Ibarionex. So stay tuned for that, but more importantly, right here and now, enjoy my chat with Ibarionex Perello, host of the Candid Frame, all-around amazing photographer, whether it's the street or otherwise, and just awesome fella to know over these years and get a chat with. Hope you enjoy, boys and girls.
On Clubhouse, but I just, I'll get on there, but I'm not going to start a room. Someone was saying, hey, you could start a room in the Candid Frame, but it's just like, no, man, I just like that. I don't want to have another thing to do.
Another thing to pull your focus.
I, yeah. Yeah, if anything, I just want something that'll give me an opportunity to go out and make some photographs. I'm in an office enough times, and I don't want to be tethered to my phone or my computer for one other, another thing.
Yeah.
I'll listen in and I'll jump in and I'll try to network and I'll try to use it that way. But I'm not going to be um, creating something like that in which I have to be responsible for and present for. Um,
Fair enough.
you know,
Yeah.
but I enjoy dropping in and I see the conversations people are having, and I've discovered a bunch of different people that I want to follow and possibly have on the show at some point. People who are completely off my radar.
Same.
So in that respect, I think it's a great thing. But I'm not gonna. I see people there that seem to be on there all the time, and I go, shoot, why aren't you working? You know, I mean, really,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, some of the, not to say that they're not working, because it seems like a lot of people are working photographers that are on there.
Yeah.
But for me, that would be with my ADHD, that would just be too big of a distraction.
That's
You
where I
know?
watch it myself. I'm actually really happy I only have an Android phone, so I have to use my wife's iPad as the only compatible machine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it like gives me sessions, and then my guilt hits, and I give it back to her. No, it's fine. No, please take it. It's been an hour. But I gotta say, it's an enjoyable medium. It's interesting to hear people just a little more unrefined and less precious about everything. It's funny
Oh,
you
yeah.
mentioned precious earlier as part of your process, and that word is really got a lot of creative power that I think a lot of people miss. It's part of
Yeah.
why I love Jeff Bridges' work. He expressly calls out preciousness and says, "You got to throw that out the window and just have fun with this thing."
Hmm.
Mm,
I've been listening to a lot of conversations with stand-up comedians, and
good.
it's been really interesting about um, their process
Yeah.
and the importance of being you know genuine
Yeah.
and pushing limits and being willing to you know fall flat on your face.
Put yourself out there, absolutely. Way
Yeah,
out there,
yeah,
like far out there.
way out there,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
just like bombing is like I think I forget who was saying it, but it's like if I'm bombing, I'm bombing all the way. It's like I'm not gonna try and get them back.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm just gonna ride it until the wheels come off.
Yeah.
And I got that because it was just like you don't want to be owned by the fear of bombing
Yeah.
because you'll always pull back.
That's where
And
you
I'm
have to
like,
let go.
wow,
Yeah.
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 It's
Who
like God, I may fail, but fuck it, just go for it anyway because that's where the surprises are.
Yeah, well, it's also where the adrenaline pumps up and that part of your brain starts reacting towards, okay, maybe we're going to crash into the tree now, but what can I do for next time? You're already thinking ahead to that, and all these centers of the brain are firing off, aren't they?
Yeah.
Who are you listening to on the comedy side? Just out of curiosity, because I
I
find
was
it
listening
very
to some Bill.
relatable.
I was listening to Bill Burr.
Good, Bill's
Um,
hilarious.
I was listening to Patrice O'Neill. He
Patrice is
passed away.
awesome.
Patrice is
Hmm.
good.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, I
So
was listening.
offensive, but so good at it.
Oh, but he's so. I like him for that, just that bold, just not being tethered by self consciousness.
Zero restraint. Huh?
Yeah, and then was listening to. Um, I'd have to take a look at my
Maybe Tim Dillon. He's come up
not
through
Tim
Rogan's
Dillon.
network.
There were a couple of women that I was listening to. Um,
Chelsea Handler,
no, not Chelsea.
Whitney Cummings,
She's the brunette, thin. She has a podcast herself.
Whitney Cummings, maybe.
Whitney Cummings.
Yeah,
I was listening to Whitney Cummings,
she's
and then
pretty bold.
I just had a channel that just had random comics,
Mm.
and it was really interesting just listening. Um, not so much how funny they were, but it was like where they were taking it, in terms of the voice that they had,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in terms of topics, a lot of comics, they cover very similar territory, relationships, politics, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's people who have both an unusual take and sort of they're unashamed of their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're gonna hate this. You're not gonna like this. You know
Yeah.
that it's not about being um, a, they're not trying to avoid being offensive, right? They're stoking people to really make them reconsider what they say is okay to talk about and not to talk about,
They're
right?
challenging
When
them
they
with
really
you.
kind of challenges is like, I know you think this,
Mm-hmm.
so don't act all self-righteous by going, ooh, because you're laughing because you've thought about it. And I'm just speaking it out loud. And I like that sort of um, comics that really sort of challenges that sensibility that we have as people into preciousness about our attitudes about different things, about things you can talk about and not talk about. And especially now when everyone is so sensitive about
So many
being
things.
offensive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Nobody will. Yeah.
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 And it's just like comics is just like, well, I got a right to talk about and make a joke about anything.
Yeah.
And some of the jokes make me uncomfortable, but I'm not going to deprive somebody of the right to be able to say it.
Yeah.
But it makes me think about, my own attitudes about different things and how I choose to express myself, especially when I choose to be less. No, I won't say less. It's not about being less honest. It's about um, what would I say? Being being accommodating to. Oh, I really
Take your time.
being accommodating about BS, I guess, or you know what it is? It's just like um, people who are not genuine.
Mm.
You know,
They break
when I
through that.
get the feeling that someone is coming to me from a place that is not genuine, that it's not so much about being honest. I think it's a genuineness, and I think there's something a distinct difference between the two. And then when I feel like that they're not being genuine, I don't feel like I have to be accommodating to that.
Why should you be? Why should you be
Yeah,
accommodating to that? If they're not putting their real intentions or self forward, what's the point?
yeah. But
Especially as we
in
get
terms of
older.
social, yeah, in terms of social things, people are always trying to be nice and social, and it's just like, nah, I don't want to sort of play that play that game. You know, if I don't want to be around somebody, I'm not gonna be around them. If we got a group of people and they're talking about a bunch of stuff that I think is a bunch of BS, it's just like, I just walk away. If they try to get me engaged with it, I'm not going to hesitate and 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 sort of police my words.
Mm.
You know, I'll be up front. You know, you're full of it.
Well, why would
You
you
know,
have less right for that than they do, than anyone else? You have
yeah.
exactly
But
you're.
growing up, you're always, at least I was taught, it's like, oh, you be polite, be respectful.
Of course.
And it's like, well, no, not everyone is deserving of that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like being able to sort of recognize that my time and my energy and my presence is worth something, and that I don't, I'm not interested in that. And I don't necessarily draw those kind of people.
Mm.
And I think
Good.
that part of it is that this attitude I have is not really conducive to those people being able to do what they do, right?
You don't
But
put them in.
I get into circles sometimes where there are those people around, and it's like, I run away.
And you're also living in LA, aren't you? Which has a bit
Yeah,
of a reputation
yeah.
for
Oh my
for
God.
that side of things, for a bit of superficialness, let's call it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that must be a tricky one. And I guess also as your visibility goes up, you want more. You get more people, or at least the energy is more tempted to pull towards you in a "Hey, I want something from you," instead they just want to chit chat or say "Hey."
Yeah, I mean, I see it
Mm,
a lot. I probably experience this more just in terms of people reaching out for the podcast.
sure, that's what I
Oh,
was
people
thinking.
want to be up
Yeah.
here on the show, and and it's just, and it's for me, it's like I get emails, and it's like you've never listened to the show just from the pitch, right?
Yeah.
You just saw photo podcast, and you sent me this email,
Yeah.
you know, or and it's just like you don't even have the courtesy of being able to listen to one episode and try to figure out whether or not this is an appropriate person to reach out to. And it's just like, and most times I don't even respond to those.
You know,
I
I
go,
was
why?
I was
Why
going
should
to
I
ask you.
respond to that?
You never call them out, like politely. You could say just to confirm. Have you actually heard the show? Do you
No,
know the
no, it's just
vibe?
not worth. It's not worth it to me.
Not even from a template, copy and paste.
No, no, I
Yeah,
don't even give them that much energy. I just kind of delete it. And sometimes they like 3 or 4 or 5 times. It's just like delete, delete, delete.
fair enough.
I think it communicates the message just as well as me. You know, their
Leave.
lack of success will probably be more of an indicator. Though I'm sure there's some people who will put them on their shows because they don't care. They just want,
A guest.
whatever
Fill
money
the
that they get. Yeah, fill, to fill the time.
mm.
Because I know exactly what I want my show to be. So it's like, when people want to advertise on the show or people want to appear on the show, it's like, I'll take a look at everyone who sends me a pitch for to be on the show and look at their work, but I know what I'm looking for. And I got like 50 slots in a given year that I could fill. And I already have hundreds and hundreds of people that I can consider. Some
Imagine.
people who sometimes it takes me years to finally get around to having someone on the show that I put on my list.
I
You know,
must do at that point.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
just,
There's
there's so many amount of people I want to talk to, but I'm trying to sort of create a really diverse selection of people. Um,
I was going to
and
mention that because you have such a wide variety, you're not just focusing on the top, the bottom, nature photographer, street photographer exclusively. You're trying to get the whole gamut of our medium, aren't you? So
yeah,
that's going to
yeah,
give
and
you a stack of names.
I'm really making the effort to get more women on.
It's
Because I
it's a
think
tricky one.
I think it's not tricky. It's just that they're uh,
Statistically, it's a little trickier. I've noticed.
the the thing is that because I'm pulling from the existing media that's out there to discover people,
Hmm.
the inherent bias that exists there is skewed towards men and white men.
Very true.
So when I'm looking, when I got my Google thing that looks through photography and stuff like that, when I go through the blogs and I go through the websites, I'm aware that that's largely who's getting profiled. So those people really come up to the fore. So it's for me, it's like I have to find other means of discovering photographers that get underneath that radar.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm interviewing a lot of people who are releasing books. And again, that's a certain demographic that gets catered to in terms of publishing books. So it's like,
Yep.
if I was solely doing it on that, there would be a bunch of people I would never get on the show.
Yeah.
So Clubhouse has been really interesting because when I come into these clubhouses and I just see who's in there, I'll just like, you know, follow them, follow their Instagrams, see what kind of work, especially if I hear them talking in a way that is kind of conducive to what I want from a conversation. I'll just like immediately put them on there.
Mm.
There are a couple of people that I already know that I'm going to invite to be on the show
Mm.
that I had no knowledge of before, but I
Bec-
like what I was hearing from their conversations, and um, you know, getting. I think I've been pretty good about LGBTQ over the past couple of years in terms of
I agree with
being
that.
purposeful about getting more
Absolutely.
of an audience there.
Yeah.
I certainly need more Native American
That makes sense.
photographers on there because I definitely have underserved them.
Mm.
But people outside of United States and Europe, you know, the challenge there is just finding photographers that can speak the language.
Yeah.
Sometimes I may make the assumption that they may not, but maybe I can just ask.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
feel comfortable speaking in English and yeah, because there are plenty of photographers that are like in South America
Yeah.
and Asia that whose work I really love, and it's like um, I would like to open up the platform um, to those photographers on the show if I can make it work because I think they're just as deserving as anybody else that's out there.
Of course, of course. It's tricky too. I had it recently. I'll say his name happily. Frank Machowski. I'll send you a link if you're curious. He does a lot of double exposure photography, especially with medium format, all on
Mm-hmm.
film. Back in the back to that old school stuff. I gave him a call, and he would have been thrilled to be on the podcast, but his English is not sustainable. He's living in Germany. He's originally from Poland. He was happy to do a written interview, which I'm going to do because part of what I enjoy with doing my thing is exposing these people, these people's
Yeah,
work. I mean, he's really good too. But it's that fine line, and I've noticed also from running this show that sometimes you can be interested in a photographer but not see anything about how they talk about their work or that side of things. And even if you do reach out, they're not really, well, let's just say they're brilliant photographers, but put them in front of a microphone and, that energy changes greatly.
yeah,
I had
yeah.
a
That's
friend over. Sorry, I was just going to say I
no,
had a
yeah,
friend over, and he was so nervous doing it. I mean, I told him I'm happy to edit and cut around and everything, but I just felt him sort of like compressing his fear,
hmm
compressing, decompressing, and just his energy going all over the place while we were chatting. In the end, I'm actually just going to redo it again. And it's tricky
yeah,
too, because now he's like, "Can you send me some questions?" I'm like, "It's not really what I do. We just start talking and see where it goes."
yeah.
Yeah. Where do you find it most challenging on your side of things getting guests since we're down that avenue? Do you find the big
Um,
names tricky? If I can touch on that, I've reached out to a few big names and some of them don't even bother to reply. One of them, I'll say his name, Carl de Keyser, great Belgian photographer, legend. He at least replied and said it's not my thing, but thank you very much.
yeah, I think it's with big names. It's just in. I have found it's easier with the big names when they're promoting something,
Yeah.
when they're promoting a book or an exhibition or something like that. It's just you know those people are busy.
Mm.
So um, that's so I have like people on my list, and I'm always keeping an eye out. Are they releasing a book? Are they coming up with an exhibition that they're going to promote? That way, it's easier to sort of get them.
Justify
Um,
their time, if you will.
right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then otherwise, it's also a point about keeping consistent. There's some people I've been working on. I'm in dialogue with for 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Really?
And no, it's yeah, and it's just like they're busy, they're high in demand, and it's just like at some point I'm hopeful that it will happen,
Uh-huh.
but it's like there are plenty of other people that I'll have a chance to talk to. Um, but usually the great majority of people that I reach out to, I'm able to connect. I think probably 75%,
I'd say about the
that
same.
I'm able to connect to. I can get them on the show, and other people just not interested, and it's like, and that's not just people who are well known and
Of course.
incredibly successful. There are the people who just like your friend, they just don't feel comfortable talking about it, and so they don't. So it's, that's fine because I don't want to um, make anyone feel uncomfortable when they're having a conversation with me. But part of it is like I feel very confident that if they sit down, or we sit down, that the expectation of what it's going to be is going to get thrown out the window because you know how I am with the show. It's just like I jump in and we're just talking.
Yeah. Yeah, very
So
much.
yeah, that's why I encourage people to listen to an episode because they always ask me, "Can you send me some questions?" And like, I don't work that way.
Yeah.
But if you listen to the show, you'll get a feel for it.
And then yay or nay. Do you sometimes
Yeah.
direct them towards particular episodes? Not just the
No, I
last
just tell, hey,
episode,
here's a
thinking that,
recent. I just yeah, here's a recent episode.
okay, just pick one. You don't
I
direct them.
yeah.
Makes
No,
sense.
I'll when I send their initial letter, I'll mention names that people recognize.
Yeah.
So I've interviewed Dan Winters, Marion Lamarck, Eli Reed, stuff like that. So it's like the pedigree of what's been on the show,
Your
and then
credibility, absolutely. I've used you in the same way. I've had Ibarionex, Valerie,
good,
etc., so
yeah,
forth.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's
it's great help.
part of what you should gain out of the experience on the broadcaster side.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be your only goal. I've written
Yeah,
some people. Well, like I don't think I'm betraying any great privacy. I mean, I spoke to. It's a fairly open discussion as far as I see it. But with the Kaiser, I replied back. There's no need to apologize. It should be comfortable on both sides. So that's how I see it fundamentally. I don't want somebody here against their will. It's funny you
yeah.
mentioned too about people pitching you. I've had one guy who did that. It was a total cold call. He was a real estate photographer of all things, and I'm still at that point where I'm just interested to talk to at least one person from every end of photography. That's part of my list right now. So I'm like, oh, real estate. Didn't even think about that. Looked through his work. He had a real estate company, the whole thing. We talked, and I it was a good conversation and everything. It's really unfortunate it was lost to faulty software, which I don't want to
Mm.
get into because I'll just cry. I lost 3 interviews that way. But what I found interesting was because I could tell he hadn't really checked out the format of the show, the way it's on loose, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think he even looked at my photo work or much else than like dialing me up on iTunes. I could feel through the conversation, not quite resistance, but I guess more surprise and kind of being put a little bit off beat. That I wasn't
Hmm.
just asking about aperture settings and how you compile your HDRs, but, you know, how do you feel about doing real estate photography? What do you do as a hobby away from it? All that sort of thing. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
weird.
because I think some people, I'd probably say maybe a third or half sometimes,
Yeah,
are pitching something, a workshop or a service or something like that. And so it's like,
that's
man,
part
I
of the
don't
game.
do that. I
Yeah.
don't do that. If you happen to do that, we'll include that as, towards the end of the conversation, but that's not what we're going to be focusing on. I'm not interested in helping you make money to promote your product on or service on my show. I'm not interested in talking to you for 45 minutes to an hour about that. That's just time filler. There are plenty of other shows that will accommodate that, but that's that's not me.
That's totally fair. I mean, it should be a byproduct. If they give a good talk and give it from the heart, then people check them out, then see the work, and then say, okay, this is
Absolutely.
fascinating. Now I'm in, and put me down for 10,000%. It's,
Exactly.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's kind of like if you had Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or someone like that in front of you, would you talk about them or would you talk about their product? I find
Oh
the
God,
Tesla
yeah,
fascinating, but I'd much rather dig into Elon Musk for an hour and say, "Hey, how's it going, man? What's up there?"
exactly.
Through the
Because that's
work.
where I gain.
Sorry,
That's
go
where I
ahead.
gain the most insight about being a photographer, living a life, having a family. If I can tap into any of those things, it's just like I want to talk to you. Even if it's experiences that have nothing to do with my own life, it's like I know I can. You're a human being. There'd be some insight that you'll be able to provide me. And for me, those are the conversations that are the most fun. I'm going to be interviewing an actor friend of mine today for the show, and he's sort of like a touchstone for me.
Mm,
Has been for as long as I've known him,
mm,
and we have these very deep conversations whenever we're together.
mm.
And I finally said, let's just record one and just share it, because I always love talking with him, and I think it's just going to be a great episode for people who take a listen to it. I know some people are going to go, "Oh, he's not a photographer," and overlook it, but it's like, I know how good these conversations can be, you know. So it's kind of like, it's my show, and that's one of the things I love. I can have him on my show, and I don't have to ask permission from anybody else. I mean, just I want to have this guy on the show, I can do that.
That's that's the best way to see it. That's how I'm seeing it. That's the joy of this whole revolution of the modern age. We don't have an overlord that we have to report to if we want to sing our song our way. You produce it yourself, you put it out yourself, and if it needs a remix down the road to really hit the charts, well, that's great. But you're getting it out and you're doing your creative vision, whether it's talking, shooting, or
Yeah,
otherwise. Man, we
yeah,
shouldn't
because I
spend
would do this if I had 5 people on the show. Just listen to the show. That's how much I love doing it.
same.
If there were 5 people out there who love it, never stop. I go, okay,
Yeah,
I won't.
yeah. And beautiful thing I hear sometimes with guests, because I mean, like I don't have your visibility as a photo podcast. They say I don't care if you have 2 or 2,000 listeners. I just want to talk and see where it goes and support my
Yeah.
photo community in one way or another, whether it's through the words or getting you a little bit of visibility by my name. Those are the people that
Hmm.
I'm just like, wow, already I love you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they
that's
give the
great. I
best
love
talks.
that.
They're the least on guard. They're the least up themselves, and the ego is basically collapsed to the point that they can actually just get on with real conversation instead of trying to push their next project.
Hmm.
Yeah, we could talk about this side of things, the entire thing, and
Yeah.
I've been recording 27 minutes of it already. Tell you what, since I do want to ask you a little bit how your year is going, and I'm guessing we're okay with another half hour. Is that all right on your side
Yeah,
of
yeah,
things? Okay,
yeah. We can
cool.
do that.
Well, before we get into that, let me just dial back a bit because I can't really let you off the hook on this since I'm feeling it so strongly. You mentioned listening to a lot of stand-up comics lately, and I mean, being from Montreal, that's in my DNA. We have a comedy festival there every year. I spent certainly some of my misspent years of a teenager hopping around there, and I've just always loved comedy. And as I sort of strangely enough, and I've had to apologize to yourself and many others for this. When I'm doing my photo work, I usually don't listen to any photo podcasts of any kind because I find it cross contaminates my thinking or
Yeah.
my mindset. Even if I'm just doing some Lightroom edits or anything, I'd rather listen to Bill Burr, Tim Dillon, Joe Rogan, just for three big names,
Hmm.
and absorb what they're saying and let that, especially for my ADHD, that part of my brain sort of be occupied so I can focus to the task at hand.
Yeah.
To get to the point of things, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I find a lot of the resonance for comedians to photography. Well, you touched on it already. I mean, they're putting things in your face. It's a matter of perspective. It's a world where I guess censorship and restraint and pushing the line are all much muddier waters as far as where the line is. But
Hmm.
fundamentally, to me, a comedian is a storyteller. And it's certainly been recognized that
Yeah.
photographers are storytellers. We're trying to bring this perspective to the situation. How do you how does that resonate with you, Ibarionex?
No, you're right on point. I mean, that's whether it's a single photograph or a series of photographs in sequence. It's about being able to communicate something, and sometimes it's not a linear story. Sometimes it's a story that is about emotion, feeling, mood.
Mm-hmm.
In the class that I talked to you, that I told you about, where I have students using their own life, I tell them that I don't so much, I'm not so much expecting you to create a linear story of your life at this point. I encourage you to take a look at it as if it was a tone poem.
A totem pole, you said.
A tone poem.
A tone poem. Oh, please explain.
Where it's more of an abstraction exploration, that it's more about not telling a story in terms of a sequence of events,
Uh-huh.
but of using different fragments of imagery to evoke a mood or a sense of an experience,
Uh-huh.
more so than anything else. And that for me is some of the more powerful stuff, because I think when people take a step away from sort of thinking that, okay, a story has a beginning, middle, and an end, that they get locked into what they have become accustomed to in terms of what a story is. And so they say, okay, this shot was made at the beginning of the series, and this one was made at the end. And they see that the only way to sort of lay out the series of images is in that time sequence, like it's on a timeline, in a video editing application.
Yeah.
And with what I'm suggesting to them is like, it doesn't matter when you made the photograph, right? It's like, how do they play off of each other? Are they evoking an emotion in you and in the people who are looking at the photographs? Is it a reflection of how you've been feeling? Because a lot of people in the class have been using their time during COVID, the moments of isolation, the feelings of loneliness, the distance from family and friends that they care about, issues with their own health, the loss of family and friends. And it's like, how do you illustrate that in a photograph? There's a lot you could say verbally about that experience, but if you only have 8 photographs, how do you do that? And so you have to take a lot of unusual choices in terms of the kinds of pictures you take, and also in terms of the culling, the selection, and the final layout of those final photographs. And I found that the students who really sort of embraced that mentality and that attitude were really able to make incredible work, even though this was the first time they'd ever done it, because they all came from a space where they were focused on the singular photograph.
Of course.
And when you make the leap to doing this way, you realize there's so many different ways of being able to tell a story. There's just not one way.
Yeah.
You've seen films that are really challenging. I think it's a film that was made by a black female director. I think it's Daughters of the Dust.
I've heard of it,
Came
but I
out in
haven't
the
seen it.
80s.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an old school film.
Doesn't follow a linear structure. It does to some degree, but it's very, very abstract, and it's really hard to, when you're not used to it. When you're used to sort of the structure of an Avengers movie,
Yeah.
Jumping into a movie like that is really challenging. And there are a lot of movies like that where it's not clear in terms of who's the antagonist, who's the protagonist, what's exactly the conflict. It's more about,
Other
how you
aspects.
feel as your experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Pulp
think
Fiction would
that,
probably be a great example for the mainstream, at least, wouldn't it? It's a very
yeah,
non-linear story, and it doesn't make
right,
sense till you get to
exactly.
the end. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there are other films that really did take a complete departure from that whole idea in terms of, um, having initiating incident,
Mm-hmm.
conflict, and all that stuff that they teach in film school. And for me, it's really fascinating to look at work that challenges me in that way,
Mm-hmm.
because when I think about story, I've often thought about story in terms of the single photograph,
Yeah.
but increasingly I'm thinking about, you know, creating, because I want to put together a little photo book, but I don't want to do it in a traditional um, format in which I'm just choosing the best of my photographs and putting them together in a book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to do something that's different, that's more along the lines of evoking an emotional experience, which is going to likely involve me making the kind of photographs that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
where it's less about, oh, here are nice street photographs I've made, and here are images that are really may have been taken on the street, but there's more self-reflective.
More looking inside than out, if you will, just to spell
Yeah.
that out. Oh. Do you think are you tempted with this new book to take a more radical approach? Remember, if I don't know if you remember, and it's fine if you don't. A few months ago, I sent you the first two chapters of my Croatia book that I've been working on the last few years, where I've been
Yeah,
mixing in
yeah, yeah.
text and not just doing an image
Mm-hmm.
per page and trying to mess around and
Yeah,
get
yeah,
like a
yeah.
mood and a feeling. And I mean, for me, that's actually the draw. One of the things I don't like about my last release is that is that it ended up being another Bruges book instead of the second book being a little more out to lunch and away from my familiar base. But oh, sorry, I got wrapped in my crap for a second there. My ego jumped up. I guess what I'm saying is what I'm really looking forward to with this book coming together. And part of why I contacted you, I remember specifically thinking, like, this isn't looking too much like some spacey art project, is it? Because I'm happy to deconstruct the structure and go out to lunch and go on the loose like we were talking about, and should have recorded for half an hour before we got to this. But do you get that temptation with this series to, I guess, come back to that question? Do you see things that where you can break that structure and still make it relatable to the viewers, not let the content get lost in the delivery, which was my main concern when I emailed you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think I'll just have to try and see what feels right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we were talking about feeling free in the moment, just to make the photographs and not being burdened with being fully invested in the outcome.
Yeah.
I think what I'll probably do is I'll just start grabbing images, and at some point I'll just start putting them together and just play around with no real sense of, oh, does this work, or does it work or not?
You want to go
Right?
by gut.
Yeah, I want to go by gut.
Good.
Yeah, there was, God, we were talking about, I was talking to somebody, I think it was one of my students. Oh, no, I was doing a critique of a portfolio of a student's work. And it was really an interesting conversation. And they were talking about, I was seeing a difference between sort of the two bodies of work. And I said, explain to me this work as opposed to this. And then she started getting into this sort of this intellectual thing in terms of why she makes the work in this way. And I said, stop. I said, don't tell me about the technical choices you're making. How does it feel when you're making these pictures as opposed to those? Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, with these pictures that I'm making here, I'm just trusting my gut.
I see.
And I was like, yeah. So with these other images, she was creating these other photographs because of the expectation her teachers, or she thought that other people would look at those photographs would make, or that she knows how to do lighting, that she knows how to work with people. But that sense of doing it from her gut was supplanted because of some other priority that she would make. And it was like, no, don't do that. I mean, you can create pictures that are illustrative of your technical ability, your ability to engage with people, while still producing images that are from your gut. And it was just like, that's the place that I want to come from. And so, like we talked about this earlier, is like there's a certain point where you know a lot of stuff and you got to let it go. And I think that I'm I've forgotten more stuff than I know, which is good. But I can still hold on to this idea that I need to know more, that I need to learn more. Well, I need to learn how to work with strobe better, whatever it is. And all it is just an obstacle for me jumping in and just doing it and completely trusting my gut and go, I'll figure it out as I go along.
I see.
Because I can make an excuse to not do a whole bunch of stuff, creatively, because I don't know how to do this or that.
Yeah.
But that's not making the choice to not do it is bullshit. I'll call myself out. I've been wanting to write a novel for the longest time, and I got skills as a writer because I've written books before.
Absolutely.
But I think about what I don't know how to do, and that stops me. And it's a bullshit excuse.
It is, but it's a common one, especially with creatives.
Yeah.
I mean,
but it's like all I need to do is just sit down there and write it. But I'm not making it a priority.
Yeah.
Right? The moment that I make it a priority, I would figure it out. My photography, I think, is probably is for me where I give in terms of my creativity, is where I dedicate more of my time with. And making the choice to sit down there and finally write a novel, It may never happen, and I'm just okay. I have to be okay with that, because I either have to make the choice to do it or let go of it and stop punishing myself for not doing it. But recognize that it is a choice that I'm making, and either way, it's okay.
Absolutely.
And the fact that I want to do more of my photography than I'm doing with, I'm good with dedicating the rest of my creative life to that.
Yeah.
Because I know I have so much more room to grow, and there I still have to struggle with that same demon of that wants to create these excuses for me not doing stuff that I feel driven to do.
That's what the psyche does, especially when
Yeah,
fear hits them. Yeah, it's the unknown.
And whether it's writing a novel, whether it's whether it's photography, whether it's music, whatever it could be,
yeah.
it's I'm dealing with the same issue, right? That same resistance. So the fact that I'm choosing not to dedicate myself to a novel doesn't mean that I've freed myself from that same struggle, right? It's just focused in the world of photography. I don't give myself a get out of jail free card because I've walked away from, writing that book or learning how to play the piano or the guitar. No. I still got to deal with it.
Yeah. This is another thing. That's beautifully said, man. I think a lot of us feel that inner dialogue with ourselves and that battle. But this is, I guess, also why I brought up the comedian side of things, because I find also some of these creative tendencies, whether they're positive or negative, also a lot of the voices in the head, if you will, particularly towards like beating ourselves up and telling ourselves that we're crap. That seems to resonate a lot with the comedy community. And like you said, also, building a story beyond one frame, that's what they're doing over their career. I see so many parallels, both on the creative path and the personality, emotional spectrum side of things, that I guess I'm curious to if there's anything there to explore it a little more. And
yeah. Personally, I used to feel like I was crap, but I don't anymore. I
really,
produce crap. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I produce crap.
Yeah.
But I know that's part of the process.
Good. How recent is that?
Yeah. Because I used to look at the work.
Yeah.
I would see that it was crap, and I thought it was a reflection of me.
Ah.
Oh, I don't have any talent. I'm not good enough. Blah 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 blah. And it's like, no, that's not true. It's like, yes, I produce a lot of crap, but it's in pursuit of getting better, about being in pursuit of making the work. That you can't get better. You can't make the kind of work that you're aspiring to make if you don't make bad work. Because I learn more from my bad work than I do from my good work.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I fail in making an effective photograph of whatever it is I'm making a photograph of, then I look at it and go, okay, why isn't it successful? Why doesn't it compare to the work that I'm measuring it against?
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that, oh, it's maybe something to do with lighting, or it may be the fact that I didn't exhaust all the possibilities when I was shooting the scene, that I just like took the picture from the first point of view that I chose, and I didn't decide to choose another angle or choose the focal length, whatever it is. So those bad photographs, I understand, those failed photographs, or whatever way you want to describe it, they are part of the creative process. You can't excise that from the process.
Of course not.
So, and the awareness that, oh, this sucks is part of it, because I'll do a shoot, I'll upload the pictures on my computer, I'll look at them, and my first reaction is, it's all garbage. Right? That's my first reaction. But I also know that if I download it and I wait 2 or 3 weeks and revisit the photographs, I'll find ones that do work. Yeah. And sometimes I did this the other day. I shot some stuff at the Huntington. I was using the 120 for the GF 120 lens, the macro.
On the GFX, yeah.
The GFX,
I've used
right?
that. That's a fun lens.
So I just went out and shot some macros in the garden, uploaded them, and went, they're okay. And then I just grabbed 4 of the ones that I liked and I hit the N key on Lightroom. That gives you a kind of a compare mode.
Yeah.
And I saw the 4 images in relationship with each other, and I went, oh, these are good. Right? And it was just because I had changed the perspective of looking at the images in relationship with each other rather than just looking at the individual photographs. Because when I was looking at the individual photographs, I was looking at them from sort of a technical point of view. How well composed are they? How well exposed? Are they sharp? Oh, there's some stuff in the other lower left-hand corner of the frame. And I was looking at it with this really high barometer of how unique and different is this photograph from anything I've made or anything anyone else has made.
Mm-hmm.
When I displayed the images in a group of 4, I just saw an interplay with the images that had nothing to do with the technical aspects of the photograph. It was just how they played off of each other, the visual contrast that was created between the images, and the overall feeling that you get when you take a look at the photographs. And I felt like all of a sudden, I felt that the images I had made 4 days before, that I thought that had sucked, I went, oh, these are really good.
Awesome.
So it's like I know that feeling of, oh, this is crap, or this is, is transitory. And it's not rooted in anything that's real. Would that be the right word? That it's
factual or correct? Do you think?
no.
Do you think it's your ego playing in, whether it's positively or negatively, more than the objective reality of whether it's good or not?
No, I think that I think I have that sort of bias of that high standard, that high bar. Is this image unlike anything I've ever shot or anyone else has ever shot before?
Does it tick all the boxes and more?
That's
Sure.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. That's no. And the idea of going out there with that sort of expectation, even subconsciously, is self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
So I think that when I have the luxury of time to take a look at the work with a much more reasonable and objective attitude, I can appreciate them for what they are, either individually or in relationship with each other, and then sort of move on. It's like I don't have to prove my value as a photographer every time I go out and shoot. I can make a good picture.
Yeah.
When I go out, and if I'm lucky during the year, I'll make a great photograph.
Yeah. One a year is not a bad number if we're talking about killer end of your life. This is what I got at the pearly gates to say I'm a photographer. Yeah. When I started, they said if you get 1 in 36 on a roll, you're already having a killer day.
And if you feel that you've gotten more, you got to raise your standard.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, yeah. I got to ask you a little bit about 21, but I got to linger on this too. Sorry, boys and girls listening. We do what we want here on this show, and Ibarionex apparently endorses that, so I'm going to go with it. Well, man, just to dig in a little, because I think this is really a fundamental one with so many creatives. I've heard it on Clubhouse recently, too. I flat out asked the floor, who else here is basically an introvert, and the silence answered everything. Do you think that self-critical side of a lot of creatives... Well, I don't know if there's a question here, which is part of the danger of doing on the loose, but I find for myself, I used to be really brutally critical with myself. I mean, people were telling me over and over again, your photos are standing out, you're doing the right thing, you're hitting the right marks, most of it locked into myself, as in moving into the public arena with it, doing the promo, would I keep up on this? Talking about it weekly. Part of the exercise for that is my confidence of I am not an idiot on talking photography. I can get on with it fairly well, so I'm working through that process. But I guess my observation for myself is, and if you have any thoughts, please throw down. On one side of things, I'm letting go of a lot of that, like you are, where you're just like, I am a capable photographer. I will at least walk out of the shoot with 3 to 5 that I'm happy with, and probably more that the client are going to be happy with. But at the same time, I also nurture that fear in a healthier way nowadays, just to be the second set of eyes looking out for me, making sure I'm not giving myself too much credit, putting out work that isn't finished or worthy or, really relevant to whatever I'm putting it out for, whether it's a social media post or a client. Do you have that side of yourself that you still keep active, I
Let
guess,
me
to make the
understand the
question?
last part of what you're saying.
Well,
I'm not
please.
clear on that. No, could you explain that
Well,
last part? I don't get.
as far as the negative side that I keep alive in that voice of like your
But in
crap.
terms of putting work out there, that part I didn't get.
Oh, whether it's giving it to the client, whether especially, excuse me, I'm just, so sorry. Yep. Whether it's going out on social media as a relevant story or just even a decent photograph. Yesterday I took I took a photo of some unearthed chapel here in Bruges. So I was basically in a pit shooting with the fisheye, trying to get the politicians in the background, get the whole story from start to finish. And when I looked back at it, I felt that the fisheye was a little distracting, that the colors were just a little oversaturated, all that sort of thing. And before that might have stopped me from putting out the photo, like you say, is this correct?
Okay,
Especially on
right.
the technical
Gotcha.
end.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But
Uh,
yeah, please tell me. I
well,
rambled.
yeah. Well, in terms of the self-criticalness, a good part of my life was involved a lot of self-loathing. A lot of shame.
Yeah.
And I think largely it was because of the undiagnosed depression and ADHD.
Mm,
The struggling and not being able to understand why I wasn't able to function like everyone else was, and being quiet and secretive about it and not being able to share it with anyone. So that feeling of you know self-hate, self-loathing, self-criticalness was really tied to that. And
that's where a lot of
there's no
mine
way I
comes
can
from.
detach it from that.
Sorry, I don't want
Yeah,
to interrupt, but the ADHD, I have that too. We've talked about this. It
yeah.
it is really bad for the confidence. Please continue for the same
And I
reasons you
think in the
said.
last 10 years, because of a
Right?
variety of different things that I was doing in terms of self-improvement, that got better.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was diagnosed with the ADHD and the major depressive disorder that a lot of it was just like it was such a huge relief
Uh,
because there was a name to it. Now I understand why I have an inability to focus. Why I get so easily distracted, why I'm not able to finish some of the simplest of tasks. And it wasn't because I was defective,
yeah.
you know.
You're
My
not an
brain
idiot.
works
You
differently.
actually have something that's
Right,
interfering with your normal process.
exactly.
Absolutely, yes.
So that was just, sometimes I wish I'd gotten it earlier, but I'm glad that I got it because I know there are people who were even older than me who've still not been diagnosed
Yeah.
with these things. So, along with the therapy and the medication and
Mm.
the education, um, it's made it so much easier that when that self-criticalness comes up, I'm able to understand where it's coming from. So when it comes to the photographs that I end up posting, I'm under the way I see Instagram and anything I post publicly is like, no, some of this stuff is not my best photographs,
Mm.
but they're photographs that are a reflection of where I'm trying to go. So there's some images that I like because not because I feel like they're a great photograph, or that they're completely successful. It's because I see something in those photographs that I've not done before, and it's an area where I'm trying to get to.
Mm.
And if it provides me that sense, I'll post it. And not surprisingly, some of those images don't get much of a likes or response, right?
They,
Some people may not even like it.
that happens.
But for me, it's like, yeah, but you don't get what I'm trying to go for. You're just seeing the photograph amongst billions of photographs that you're swiping through your thumb, and you just have an instant reaction, based on what you personally like. For me, the images that I like, that I post, and the images that I usually take the time to comment
Mm.
on Instagram are pictures that I are showing something that I'm striving to get to.
That makes
If I
total
say,
sense.
oh, I get excited by, oh my God, I never thought of seeing it in that way.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that interests me. That's just why, it's so easy to swipe through so much of the work out there It's not that it's not good. People talk about a lot of the work on Instagram is crap. It's like, for me it's like that's not my attitude towards it. My attitude is that it's like there's a lot of work out there that I know I could make. Okay, but I'm not using that as a way of lifting myself up and say, oh, I'm a better photographer.
Mm.
Okay. The fact that I look at photographs and I go, I can make that is just a confirmation for me in terms of my skill level and my experience. What I'm looking for are people whose work I don't think I could make yet. And I look at that and I go, I never would have made that choice.
Mm.
And thinking about what led them to do it. And usually that has nothing to do with um, the camera they use, the focal length, the post processing. It's a way that they saw the scene and the moment
Yeah.
that for me just clicks. And I get it. Part of me gets it because because most people would just pass by it. But I'll see something there and I go, oh, there's something there. Understanding what that is and being able to recognize that when I'm in the real world and see what made me react to their photograph
Mm.
and then try in my own way to do something similar and develop that muscle so that I become as adept as to doing that as I am with everything else. And then when I've done that, it's like, okay, move on to the next thing.
Makes total sense. Absolutely. That's what I think a lot of people forget too, that the person posting that stuff is on a journey. It might make absolutely no
Yeah.
sense to you as a viewer, but to the ones hitting the send button or post button, it's a critical part of what they're trying to say. That's
Lee
also why,
Friedlander is
yeah,
a
tell me.
perfect example of that. Lee Friedlander.
Yes, yeah, tell me.
I remember first taking a look at his photographs. I couldn't make any sense of that stuff. I was like, why are these photographs good? You know? And then I grew and I took a look at those photographs and I saw what he was doing. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah,
You know?
and then it hits you in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Do you do you have trouble looking at photos without activating the photographer part of your brain?
No, it's not difficult. I
Okay.
think, there's sometimes I take a look at a photograph and I take pleasure in taking a look at the photograph. I collect photo books all the time. And sometimes I purposely sit down to learn from the photographs. And there are other times I just sit down there and I just go, ooh,
That's
and just
beautiful.
take pleasure in the go and in seeing the unique way someone chose to see something.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, that's just beautiful.
That's,
And
yeah.
that's good. I mean, yeah, because I can't just look at it from sort of this clinical coroner dissecting every photograph, trying to see what I can learn from it because there's not a lot of joy you can be had from that if that's all you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we come to photography because there's this joy of discovery that happens there, and sometimes the joy of discovery happens when I'm making a photograph, but more often than not, it's the joy that comes from looking at someone else's photograph and having that shot of serotonin,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Yep.
just go, oh wow, that's wonderful. I
Mwah.
love that.
Yeah. Well, you're always asking people to recommend other photographers. Who's floating your boat right now? Where are you getting your most inspiration from? Do you feel like sharing?
Yeah, there is. Let me pull it up. I'm always looking for different people to interview for the show. And where did I put them?
That must that must be a nice way of sort of expanding beyond your usual horizons too, towards new photography, towards new influences.
I didn't save it in my bookmark. Okay, let me see if I can get them here.
Take time,
If I
please.
can find them on Instagram here.
And actually, so I won't have to edit this out, I'll just remind everyone that Ibarionex does this wonderful podcast, in case you're not aware, called The Candid Frame. We'll give it a blatant promo while he digs around his bookmarks. It is one of the premier photography podcasts out there on the podcast world side of things. He's one of the first, and I think also, Ibarionex, correct me, one of the first to really get into interviewing photographers in such a way. Beyond the gear, he's, how many episodes now, Ibarionex? 500 and...
520 something.
Oh, look at that. So many that even he's losing count. So that
Yeah.
gives you all the variety and amazingness and depth that you could ask for from a photography podcast. He's been a huge influence here on This Photo Life, especially on the side of not asking stupid questions and trying to keep a decent thread going. And, what more can I say? Forget his photography podcast. His photography is pretty kick-ass too. Street photographer extraordinaire, author of how many books on photography in general and a few on street?
It's about 6, going on 6, I think.
Look at that, 6 going on 6. I'm sure it's going to be 7 one day. You can find him on Instagram.com. Oh, he's ready with his bookmark, so I'll put the rest at the end of the show.
It's Elena Carrasco.
Yeah.
She's Italian, I think Italian-born photographer or Italian-American.
Right.
She has been working for decades, largely photographing her own life, the life of her mother, her children, her relationships. She has a book right now called, I think, Midlife, which is examining her life, during midlife. And her work is amazing. It's incredibly vulnerable, open, genuine, all the things that I really love in just great photographs. I had hoped to interview her last year, but it didn't work out. But her work is incredibly powerful. And the other photographer who I am going to be interviewing soon is Mona Kuhn, Kuhn.
I've heard of her.
And she's famous for nudes.
Yeah.
That she's done. But Mona, saying her work is nudes is
a disservice.
Yeah, a real disservice. The way that she photographs the human body is just remarkable. The way she chooses light and line and shape and color. I mean, I look at those photographs and they're mesmerizing. I was seeing someone else who does nudes, and you could see the male gaze thing that a lot of really, really clearly, in terms of the way that the sexuality of the model was really at sort of the forefront of it. And with Mona, you don't feel that. And I'm interested in hearing when I talk to her in terms about that, because I don't think it's just the fact that she's a woman. I think there's something else at play in terms of how she sees the form, and I'm really curious to see that. I just got her latest book, which I think is a kind of a retrospective of her work, and I just casually glanced at it, and it's one of those books that I'm going to just sit there and just really enjoy just looking at, just because she's really good at what she does. Both of these photographers are really true to the way that they see the world and how they photograph it. And I aspire to be that.
That truth.
That truth where you just see, the uniqueness of a human being in their photographs, and you go, that's who they are. And it's not tied to anything in terms of technical, with what lens they use, what filter that they use. You just look at it and just go. We would have said that the more universal you want your work to be, the more personal it needs to be. Something along those lines.
I've never heard that, but that makes total sense, especially right now. Yeah. So what impresses you most with the photographer? That truth, that unabashed openness, or
Yeah, that lack of BS, that lack of pretension.
yeah.
You s- you you recognize it when you see it. It's like when you meet somebody in person and you go, not just that you like that person, but you feel like they're real. And you get people who, actors or politicians or people who are trying to sell you stuff, and everyone sort of has a sort of agenda, or people who dismiss you because, well, what do you do, and all that other stuff. And then you meet somebody who kind of engages you in a way that you just feel like they saw me and I saw them.
They're present.
There's a
Yeah.
there's a gift when
Uh,
you have that moment. I mean, to some degree, I like the fact that I feel like I get that in the interviews. When it happens in the real world, man, that's such a gift. Even if I never see that person again,
yeah.
it's just like I really like that moment that we shared.
Yeah. Did you have?
And
I'm sorry, please.
no, go ahead, please.
Did you have more trouble getting to that moment, or enjoying that moment when you were more in your self depression and
Oh
undiagnosed
yeah.
ADHD?
Oh my
You couldn't
God.
embrace it.
Yeah,
You
I
couldn't
was in my
even.
head all
You
the
couldn't
time.
ride into that groove. You'd miss all these opportunities or bail out of them or whatever.
And I just kept digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper because
Oh.
I was always afraid that people could see my insides from my outsides.
Hmm.
You know,
Would imposter syndrome feel the most accurate to describe that in a general way?
that would be
Insides on the
part of it,
outsides?
but not completely. Yeah,
It
I mean
shouldn't be.
that was a part of it, but not completely. I mean, there was just like I was so much in turmoil inside,
Oh.
and because I was so ashamed of it, I never could talk to anybody about it. So I was constantly hiding, trying to find ways of you know, of
Hiding in plain
not
sight
revealing.
with a talking
Right, exactly.
podcast too, you sneaky boy.
And then
Huh.
trying to be whatever I thought other people wanted me to be,
Yeah.
which meant I was not sincere, I was not genuine. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I wasn't having the kinds of friendships that result from having a sincere, honest, and open relationship with another human being,
Mm-hmm.
seeing that as confirmation that I am a piece of crap
Oh, of course you were
and that there is
self-validating your
something wrong with me.
crapness.
So it was just like, yeah, I was
Yeah.
on that hamster wheel like a mofo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh man, I'm so glad that you're out of that part. I've had that exact same thing run through my life, and I still feel it to this day. Actually, I remember the first podcast, the first live show with the video. Now, even chatting on Clubhouse the first couple of times, it's just
Hmm.
hello everybody.
Yeah.
I take
Yeah. Yeah.
photos when I can talk all day and all night about this stuff.
Hmm.
But you lock up because you're just too busy, locked in your own ego and your own bullshit. Yeah. Yeah. Now that you've let go of it to a more substantial degree, I assume also your photography is really flowering for you. Never mind
Yeah, I
what.
would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, you feel more satisfied with the work, I presume.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that something. I can see the things that are happening,
Yeah.
even though I can't quantify them verbally, and I don't want to.
Fair.
I can see it, and for
Hmm.
me, that's good because I don't feel like I'm in a that I'm stuck, that I'm repeating myself.
And it's changing your photography, I assume. Would you feel
I'll wait and make that judgment later. I
okay?
think it's a little presumptive to say now.
It's a difficult one to answer. Absolutely,
Yeah.
expertly deferred, sir. No, deflected. Excuse me, deflected. I said that to someone the other day. Oh, we can really go for it, and they said, yeah, absolutely. And I said, great. If it ever gets uncomfortable, just deflect with a little bit of class.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Oh man, I really could talk to you all day about this. I say this often, but here I could talk all day
Well, I
about
really
this.
enjoyed this. This is great fun. Great way to start my morning.
Good. We didn't get to anything about your last year, so there's that. Can you take 5 more minutes of this, and we'll run through a little bit of 2020? I'll just cut to the heart of it.
Uh,
I don't want
yeah.
to bother you
Yeah.
because, of course,
But
I think I'm crap, and I don't want to take up your time.
no. In terms of my 2020,
Yeah.
I think it was more a matter of I think it was just more of frustration that I couldn't do the things that I normally would have done in terms of my street photography and the travel photography
Hmm.
and all that stuff. So that was a sort of a frustration. But I think that I was experiencing a lot of personal growth in the year. So I don't see 2020 um, really as a lost year for me.
Hmm.
I think that um, there was a lot of self introspection, and no, that's redundant. A lot of introspection that was happening,
Yeah.
and a lot of you know good things, especially sort of refining how I kind of contend with my mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the different things that I was facing on a personal level, I could see that I was handling a lot of those things better, including some difficult family issues. And just because of I found myself responding and reacting to those circumstances in a lot healthier way,
Mm-hmm.
I saw 2020 as sort of a good growth year for me, even though creatively I wasn't able to do the kind of work to the amount that I wanted to do it. So
That's that says a lot. Yeah, I think a lot of us were feeling that. I mean, what do you expect from the year to come, or maybe the next 2 years, if you want to go that far?
I think more growth. I'm really excited about it. Um, I think that this loosening of this yoke of self consciousness
Hmm.
is I can feel it getting looser and looser. So
Hmm.
I think that a lot of aspects of my life are going to reflect that. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to manifest itself in terms of, you know, my photography, my writing, my podcasting, but I know it will.
That's
And so that leaves me very hopeful for this year. Um, I can already see that I'm making different choices, um, making a shifting in priorities,
hmm.
being willing to sort of let certain things go. Um, so there's a coalescing, I think, that's happening, and I don't, I'm not, I don't set any expectation in terms of specific goals I want to make this year.
Hmm.
I just want to feel like I continue to be in this zone that I've been in, just as a human being, and that I think that I'll likely see that growth reflected in the work that I produce.
I would have no doubt about that, especially the way that you. I mean, you're living the photographic like life pretty hard and full, man. It's going to crawl
Yeah.
out into your work and what evolves around your work too. Hmm. Interesting. Well, let me just skip to the last question I've been asking everyone because I think we covered a lot of ground. And basically, I mean, anyone who's been listening to this little segment in the series know what I've been asking, and I think we covered it. But what made you smile most out of 2020?
Made me small most. Wow.
Hmm.
Oh, I had a wonderful moment last year. I work out of my garage,
Hmm.
and one day I was in my kitchen, and through the window, I saw um, mockingbirds had made a nest in the tree that was just outside my window. And I went and looked, and these two mockingbirds had created a nest, and there were two eggs in there. And for the next couple of weeks, I just checked the progress. Unfortunately, one of the eggs didn't make it, but I got to see these mockingbirds going back and forth. I saw the chick once it had
Hmm.
come out of its egg,
Hmm. Were you there for the
and
hatching?
no, I missed it.
It
I missed
happens.
that. I was
It's a
going
lottery.
back there and back there, but
It's a lottery.
but I made a photograph with my iPhone. I put it in there, and the bird's beak was open as if I was its mother or its dad,
Hmm.
about to give it. And I was reading about mockingbirds, um, and how long it takes them, between the egg being hatched and them being able to sort of fly off. And one day the nest was empty, and that was one of the greatest moments of joy that I had last year, was being a chance to sort of witness that, and it was a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the moments that I think just made me very, very happy to have witnessed.
Huh. Oh, that's beautiful, man. Normally I would leave it here, but since you're going through this stage of progress, and I don't think I'm driving you too nuts, so I can squeeze 2 more minutes out of the stone. Hang up if you disagree. Last time you were on my show, as one of the first guests of the show, no less, I did what I've been doing to every guest, what I do to people when they come on my photo tour as Photo Tour Bruges, etc., so forth. So I got to ask you this question again, as you're at this stage of evolution. How do you feel about your photography?
Oh, I feel great about it. I feel good about it. I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be.
Interesting. I look forward to comparing to that last episode. Maybe I'll click it in the edit too
Yeah,
for
I'll
the
be very
listeners.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all such a journey with this, and oh man, I should wrap it up neatly. I'm glad you've been part of my journey for this, including that last episode, this episode, and all the amazing work that you do with the Candid Frame as well as your photography. Tell you what, I'll keep it neat and clean. We're going to throw links in the description. I believe it's still ibarionex.net. I've mentioned the Candid Frame, so you don't have to shill this time round. Ibarionex, thank you so much for this chat, and I hope the viewers feel the same. Thank you again, man.
Thank you, brother. Greatly appreciate it.
Pleasure was mine. Oh, kids, that was such a good talk with Ibarionex, at least for me, and I think for him too. It was from the heart, and he certainly covered a lot of topics I think a lot of us are going through as photographers. Obviously, if some of us are podcasting too, or doing the guest thing in one way or another, it's rather interesting to hear a peek backstage, which is part of why I was happy to leave that in there. And just, I hope you got something from it, boys and girls, especially if, like Ibarionex, like me, like so many other visual creatives, you're just sitting in your doubt or worry or having to like prioritize other people in front of yourself and what you want to do. Yeah, I think this might be a little bit cathartic for all of us. All right. Make sure to follow Ibarionex's work if you enjoyed the chit chat or you've poked around and enjoyed his content as far as it goes with his podcast, The Candid Frame, his street photography and otherwise work is Ibarionex on the social media platforms. All that linked in the description. And speaking of social media platforms that we opened the show with, how about Clubhouse? Why don't you follow him there? Ibarionex Perello. Run a search. You'll see him. You'll be able to follow, and sticking to how Clubhouse works by following him, you'll be able to see what rooms he's in, what sort of folk he's enjoying, and clubs he's enjoying within the great Clubhouse app that we've all been getting into over the last little while. And yeah, I mean, Clubhouse is rather an interesting medium. I've mentioned it over the, what was it, about 2-3 episodes. I got into it for a little while. And frankly, I thought it'd be a nice way to round out the show by just pointing out that, as mentioned with Ibarionex, when you follow him, you get to see the rooms he's in, is interested in, the clubs that he might be a part of and participating in. It's all when he's actually in there, using him as an example. But the whole thing works like that. And with, that in mind, pick up your iPad. Not the wife's anymore. I got to update my own finally, thanks to having a tour as Photo Tour Bruges, finally, after 6.5 months. And search out a few people. Click that follow button on them so that you can see the rooms that they're hanging out with and the conversations that they're participating in one way or another. I mean, obviously, if you head to my own, Andy McSweeney over on Clubhouse, you'll be able to see who I'm following right there. And you can go through those names and pick out who you think might be interesting. I keep my following list down because I want to kind of just keep a balance to things and not just follow back and do all that sort of stuff that I never really saw the point of. So it's a fairly tight list as far as it goes. I think some of the names that stand out in particular are worth a quick mention. I'm just going to pick one or two, so don't be offended if you're not on this list. But, hey, Chelsea Lauren, you got to kick this off because you kicked off the Behind the Lens Club over on Clubhouse. That has been an amazing source of inspiration, information, and general chit-chat, getting to know each other with so many other photographers. Chelsea, thank you for all that, and I hope you get a few followers out of it. Boys and girls, you follow Chelsea, or even better, join the Behind the Lens Club that she is a part of and the founder of, no less. And then you'll see some amazing photographers on there. I mean, hey, James Lavish is worth a mention. Stefan Bollinger is worth a mention. I can't believe I forgot his name. Richard Wayne, Waine, is well worth a follow. Ryan Hornby, even though he's not a photographer, he's a digital consultant, marketer, and advisor to both fashion photographers and models, as well as beyond the fashion industry. He shares a whole bunch of stuff, and he's a charming fella too, so make sure to give him a follow. And while we're here naming off a few names, Peter Hurley, guest of the last episode, running the Headshot Crew Room, very much worth a follow. Scott Rosenthal, you stick out as a name that I think people should click the follow button for because you're running some great rooms and hopping around into some also great rooms. Tom Hoops, you got to get some followers out of this, man, because you're doing some great stuff. Jeffrey Sidoris, under-mentioned name, influence, and all-around fella to my photographic work, as well as this Photo Life podcast, etc., has got to get a mention because he's awesome, and his process-driven as well as photo fluff rooms are very, very much worth a listen on the emotional, creative, and even technical side of photography. And you can go to my follower list if you want to see some more, boys and girls. I'm not going to spend 20 minutes recording and rating off names, but that's just a kickoff point, if nothing. And you can see the whole listing if you head over to Clubhouse and take a look at my profile, Andy McSweeney. So that is a few ideas, as well as a few clubs, I hope. I'm in to give you a couple more clubs, which is, of course, central meeting areas for all these people on Clubhouse. In the photographic way, I find Behind the Lens worth a mention, Headshot Crew worth a mention, both of those for the second time because they're so good. As I mentioned, Photo Fluff is rather enjoyable and I think well worth a listen, especially for their weekly interviews with interesting photographers. And oh, wait, why am I looking at the tablet? This Photo Life, the name of this podcast, is a club on Clubhouse run by yours truly that you can join up to and have a gander, a listen, and all that sort of thing. Yeah, of course I got a room on Clubhouse. It was about time, wasn't it? I've been on there 2 months listening, chit-chatting away. We got to take it up a notch. Yeah. So feel free to check out all that stuff. The one funny thing, and this is a little bit of a teaser towards next week's episode, is that this Photo Life will be changing names both on Clubhouse and as a podcast called This Photo Life very shortly. I have figured out a new name that is appealing to me as I go through some changes of my own and some growth of my own, as well as wanting to refresh things overall. And as I'll talk about, centralize more than the podcast and the Clubhouse group. Well, it's time for a rebrand, boys and girls, so we're going to be doing that real soon. And you can still find me as This Photo Life, both on the podcast front and Clubhouse front. But if you're listening to this a little later, make sure you check out the next episode, episode 52 of This Photo Life, so that you can find out the magical new name and branding we are going with. Yeah, that's all for next week. Don't worry, the show ain't totally changing format. We're still bibble-babbling on the loose, including when we have interviews with photographers big to small and everything in between, as well as my own solo rants that I do here, there, and everywhere, much less around guests. Yeah, all that's still going on, still happening, and I think even taking maybe a new level up in evolution and form, which is part of why I want to do the rebrand, just to draw the line and move it forward from there. So that is to come on this photo life, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I really hope you enjoyed what's to come on this photo life, whether it was this episode with Ibarionex Perello, sharing his heart, soul, and everything else on his photography and otherwise, whether it was the last episode with world-renowned headshot photographer extraordinaire Peter Hurley, or if it's, the 49 episodes before that here on this photo life, where we've had some amazing guests, not only in the commercial photography space, but also in the creative, and as I say, from big to small and everything in between. It's something that I'm proud of, even when I haven't shown the confidence thereof. And damn it, am I excited to make more, especially as I truly and fully, I think, pick up my confidence off the floor and put it firmly into the safe of my heart, proper and correct. We'll see. It's about a week in since that Hurley interview where I talk about that before and after the interview, as well as otherwise. But it's settling well, boys and girls, and it is something to chase. And believe you me, especially over 40, as a hyper-distracted Andy at times, if I can do it, you can do it. So not to dwell on that, but especially with Ibarionex talking about his own struggles, worries, concerns, and all that sort of stuff, I think it's worth a mention one more time on the way out the door. And out the door we will go. I am Andy McSweeney of Andy McSweeney Photography and Photo Tour Bruges. That is, of course, the top-rated original city tour and photography workshop here in Bruges. Check the link for description and a little discount code because I am my own sponsor. And I guess that's all we have to say. I got a little plug on the way out the door because that keeps the taxman and the accountant happy. So that's done. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what to do at this point. It is that time. Get out there. Get shooting. See ya.